In this post, we will explore how we can customize the ShipTo section on checkout page. We will add a shipping addresses list under this section and allow customer to update the shipping addresses based on the selection. Then we will also create a button to allow customer to add or edit a new address. The guest user or customer with no addresses list will see the default behavior. We will achieve this step by step. So let's get started. We have already created a simple module. Before proceeding further, let's take a look at the checkout layout file. We need to look for a component that works with the ShipTo section. So under the sidebar node, we have a shipping information component, which will be helpful to customize a ShipTo section. Instead of modifying the whole component, we will go with creating a Mixin shipping information component using require.js config. Now create the Mixin component. Create an object shipping information Mixin. Below this object, just return the extended target and pass the Mixin object as parameter. Now let's add our logic inside the Mixin object. We need to customize its template file. Create a template file. Copy all of the content from shipping information template file and paste inside the newly created file. We will customize the shipping information content from this template. Now open the shipping information Mixin component and let's customize the back method, which is used to navigate back to the shipping section. For now, let's add alert message so we make sure the Mixin is working properly. So now if we try to click the edit button, an alert message is shown instead of navigating back to the shipping. But wait, we need to make sure the template was not being overridden anywhere else. On findings, we see earlier the template was being overridden by in the in-store front-end module. So in this case, we will adopt another strategy. We will override all of these templates inside the require.js config. First, map the template from a checkout. And then in-store pickup. We will have to create a new template file for in-store pickup. So go ahead and create the template file under the in-store pickup directory and copy the content from in-store pickup template file. Inside the component, remove the template path. Now create address list template property and specify the path to the template. This is going to be a child template file. We will create form inside this template file. Let's see it later on. Now inside the shipping information Mixin, add no code dependency. Next we need address list JS model dependency. Now let's create the address options object. Apply the filter to the address list. And compare the type with customer address string. So we have only customer addresses listed only. Now create options obj observable array property with the customer address list as its default value. Next, create the initialize method and reinitialize options obj property with all available addresses. Now we need to add code dependency from checkout. Create init observable method and begin initializing the observable properties. First, create selected address property and set shipping address as its default value. Finally, we must return the current instance to make method chainable. Now inside initialize method, add shipping address subscription. It should update the selected address property. Now back in address list template file, let's begin adding the content. In data binding, we need if condition and need to make sure the options obj property has some length. Add the label. Next, create the select element. In options binding, specify the options obj property. For options text, let's choose first name property for now, and the value of value binding is going to be selected address property. Now back in component, add edit address list property with the default value false. Now modify the back method and toggle the edit address list property. Now it's the time to update the shipping information template files. Add if inline condition binding and specify edit address property into false in condition. Then add knockout render element. Template should render only when edit address list property is true. Specify the address list template property in args attribute. This will render the address list template when edit address list property has true value. Now copy all of the content and paste inside the store pickup shipping information template file. Flash the cache and remove the static or generated content. Reload the page. Edit the address. The dropdown rendered as expected with the first name property set for all options. Now inside the component Mixin, let's create the address options text method which takes an address object as a parameter. This method will simplify the options text for dropdown. Inside the address list template, replace the first name property with the address options text method. So now we get the inline address for every option, which will be very descriptive and useful. Now let's create the buttons to perform action on addresses. So first create a form element, then create a button with text binding update address and having submit type. Now back in component, let's create another method update address. This will select the chosen address from dropdown. Next we need a JS section set shipping information dependency. Invoke the set shipping information action and specify a callback function when request has been completed. Create self variable and assign it the component current instance. Now inside the callback function, set the edit address list property to false. This will hide the dropdown and show the address text. Now create the submit binding for the form element. This should trigger the update address method. Now let's check our changes. Modify the address and click the update button. This will update the selected shipping address and hide the form. At shipping section, we see the change was also reflected. Now if we alternatively try with a new address, this breaks the template. So let's resolve this issue. Open the Mixin component, head to the address option text method. So basically the issue here is the newly created address object does not contain get address inline method. So we need a handler method for this purpose. Go ahead and create a method get address inline which takes an address object parameter. Create address string variable. Concatenate the first name with the last and then street. The street property is an object. We need its value in a simple array, so we join them to make a simple address string. We will achieve this using underscore dependency. Call the values function from underscore and specify the street address as parameter. Then invoke the join function to convert all items into a string. Next, concatenate the city and region. And at last, the country ID. Return the address string. Make sure there's no double spacing in the string. We can fix using the replace function and specifying the regular expression. Next, we need to replace the country ID with the country name. We can do that choosing data directive from customer data.js model. So first add the customer data.js model dependency. Create the country data property. Use customer data object to invoke the get method. Specify the directory data string as an argument. Now go ahead and create a new method, get country name. It will take country ID as an argument. Return and invoke the country data and specify the country ID as a key. If the result is not undefined, access the name property and return it. Otherwise, return an empty result. Now call the getCountryName method and pass address country ID as an argument. Let's fix the regular expression. It has an extra space. Remove the space. Now is the time to address and improve the address option text method. Replace the getAddressInLine method with the ternary operator. Here we will check if address type is equal to the customer address string. Then call getAddressInLine method from the address object. We have created an initialized Mixin context variable outside the component. The purpose of this variable is to return context of current component. Now call Mixin context.getAddressInLine and pass address object as an argument. Now let's test the changes. We have selected the newly created address. If we try to edit the address, the dropdown works as expected this time. The address string is now significantly more descriptive. Now let's add an edit action for the new address. We need to make sure that this action should be available only when the newly created address is selected. So we need to create another observable property. Create isFormData property. The default value should be false. Then update isFormData property. The value should be based on the selected address type, which should not be equal to the customer address string. Now open the address list template file, add visible data binding to the edit action and specify isFormData property. Then add the click binding and specify edit address method. Now go ahead and create this method inside the component. We will add the logic here shortly. Before that, let's check how render component displays the model. Open the checkout module and let's open the default shipping address render component. We need to copy the content from edit address method, and we also need show popup method. First copy the show popup method and paste inside the Mixin component. Then copy the content from edit address method and paste inside the edit address method within the Mixin component. Next, we need to add the required dependencies. Add the form popup state dependency, and then we need to add jQuery dependency. Flush the cache and clear the static or generated content. Reload the checkout page. Click the next button to navigate to the payment page. Edit the ShipTo address. The edit button loaded along with the new address selected in the dropdown. Click the edit button to load the model. Modify the address and click ship here button. Clicking the update address button will select the newly created address. Now if we navigate to the shipping section, we see the changes have been reflected successfully. However, the ShipTo address text was not updated yet. So let's fix that. Inside init observable method, add selected address subscription. On any update, the isFormData property will be set to false. If address type is not the customer address, that is if it's a new address, then set the isFormData property to true. We can simplify the property setter. Replace the false value with the condition. This will directly set the value to true or false based on the address type. Now let's test the changes. Edit the address and modify the address data. Then click ship here button to update the selection. Click update address button. The ShipTo address will still not modified. However, we see it got updated for dropdown. Here we need two things to fix. First, when ship to button is clicked from address form, it should update the ship to section. The drop-down should hide. So let's add these changes. So to address first issue, let's first take a look into the shipping component from checkout module. Here our focus is at the save new address method. This method is triggered whenever ship here button is clicked from a shipping form model. We want the shipping information update API should hit whenever the new address is updated from a ship to section. This logic should execute only if validation has passed. So this means we need another mixin, and this time we need mixin for shipping component. Open the require.js config, create the mixin for shipping component, specify the mixin path. Now create the shipping mixin component. Create shipping component mixin object and pass it as an argument to the extended method. Now let's override the save new address method to push our custom logic inside. Call the parent logic first. If validation has passed, then run the logic. Call the shipping information method after an interval of 50 milliseconds. This way we make sure that the shipping information is updated when the shipping address selection has been completed. However, we can also do this without the timeout function. As we know, the shipping information API is called only when the next button is clicked. However, with this addition, shipping information API is also executing. So we need to make sure this method is called only when address is edited from ship to section. Open the shipping information component. Create a new observable property. Is shipping pop-up opened? The default value will be false. We will use linking property to make the properties shared between the components. Links enables the properties to be used for cross-checking the changes. So let's specify is shipping pop-up open property as a key, and the value is going to be the path to the component. So the path will be formed as checkout, then dot and sidebar, dot shipping information. Now specify the path checkout dot sidebar and dot shipping information. Now with the colon specify the property name that is to be shared between the components. Is shipping form opened. Now we need to copy the same path inside the shipping mixin component. Let's first create is pop-up opened observable property. The default value is false. Now specify the property name as key and paste the copied path to the shipping information component along with the property name. Inside save new address method, we need to add an additional condition with the AND operator, and the condition when is pop-up open property is set to true. Next, we need to override on close pop-up method, call the parent logic, and then set the is pop-up open property to false. Now back in shipping information component, let's create another links property having the property edit address list as key. The path will be same. Specify the property name edit ship to. Now open the shipping component and create an observable property edit ship to address with the default value set to false. Copy the path from a shipping information component and paste it. Set edit ship to address property to false. This automatically modified the linking property. Now open the shipping information component. We will modify the value of is shipping pop-up open property when the model is shown. So inside show pop-up method, set the shipping pop-up open property to true. This will update the linking property as well. Now let's test the changes. Click the next button, edit the ship to address, then click the edit action, modify the shipping data. Clicking the ship here button shows the blank page now. So let's fix that. If we take a look at shipping component method, set shipping information. Here set shipping information action is being called. This calls the shipping information API to set the shipping data. When request is completed, the step navigator navigates to the next section. So the solution to this issue is to navigate back to the shipping page. Then this page will navigate back to the payment section automatically. So open the shipping component. Let's add a step navigator model dependency. Now inside save new address method, right under the condition and before set timeout function, call navigate to method using step navigator instance. Specify the shipping as a parameter to the method. Now let's test the changes. Edit the address, modify the form data, click ship here button. This time the page navigation worked as expected and the changes are also reflected to the ShipTo section. Next we need to make sure the edit action is visible only when there exists a new address. Inside the shipping information component, create has new address property and let's make it computed. Iterate through the address list and look for the new customer address type. Open the address list template file and then now code if condition to check if has new address property is true. Move the edit action under the condition. So the action will be visible only if has new address property is true. Then add another action with visible binding has new address. Specify the text add address. Then add click binding and specify edit address method. Let's test the changes we have made so far. Edit the ShipTo section. Click add address section button. Save the address. The address has been added successfully. Place the order. Newly created address has been saved with the order. We don't want the model to show up for guest users or for customers with no addresses. So let's go ahead and hide that. Inside the shipping information component, add the customer model dependency. Create a property is new address selected. The default value is going to be Boolean and based on a condition whether the customer is not logged in or there are no addresses in the address options. Now go to the edit address method and add a condition if this new address selected property is true. We will add the logic here in a moment. First we need to add the step-navigator JS model dependency. Now under condition, add navigator method using step-navigator object and specify shipping as parameter. Finally break the further execution. Next, inside the back method, add a condition if is new address selected property is true. Then execute the parent logic and then return. Time to see the changes we have made so far. The customer has no address in the list. Now click the next button. This time clicking the edit button has its default behavior.